welcome to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. We're doing our recap of the Giants' brutal Week 8 loss to the Jets. The final score, the Jets 13, the Giants 10 in overtime, a game that looked like the Giants had won right down to the last second of the game. The Jets find a way to drive down the field, get a field goal off with 1 second left, tie the game, go into overtime. The Giants win the coin toss, take the ball, run a series of interesting plays that go nowhere,
Yep.
and then punt the ball. The Jets manage to drive back down the field, hit the game-winning field goal, and that's all she wrote. The Giants fall to 2-6, and the Jets improved their record to 4-3. In this game, we saw Tyrod Taylor get hurt early in the game, take a brutal hit, came up in agony, and he went immediately to the hospital. Word has it he injured his ribs, and he's staying overnight at the hospital. We don't know much more than that at this point. Tommy DeVito came in the game and did not throw a pass for the entire second half. And then I think he threw 4 passes or 3 passes in overtime, but one was a throw in the flat to Saquon, and I think a couple were screens to Saquon behind
Yeah.
the line of
I
scrimmage. And
think he
yeah,
threw one pass in the second half, and that was it.
so the Giants are 2-6, lose 13-10 to the Jets. Monty, take it from there, man. What are your thoughts after this game?
It was a demoralizing loss in so many ways, man. I just felt for the players during that game. I really felt for the defense. The defense did everything they could. Again, we just talking about this every week, it seems like, but they did everything they could to win this game, and they put it in their hands to win the game. Kayvon Thibodeau shut the game out. He got 2 sacks on that final drive and a sack on 4th down. Like, that should have been the final drive, and it should have been over. Game over, let's win it. Um, and the offense took the ball. We continued to run it. We had success running the ball, and they decided to kick a field goal with a hurt Graham Gano, and he missed it instead of going for it on 4th and 1. I don't know, man. I didn't feel great about that decision. I
We'll get into
there's a
that.
lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of mixed opinions on this, but in my opinion, I think anybody with eyes can tell Graham Gano isn't healthy. I mean, first of all, it's everything we've been hearing. He's been limited in practice for 2 weeks. He's publicly said he needs knee surgery, and this is not a guy who just misses field goals. He missed one last week. He missed another one this week. I don't know how you had the confidence to send him back out there with, you know, in a important game and, give up 8 more yards and not take a shot at, a 4th and 1. It didn't make any sense to me because, like, even if you're like comparing the two situations versus what's more likely a field goal or 4th and 1, at least you don't get pushed back 8 more yards the for the field position. He's not. They need IR. Man, he is not right. It is so clear that he missed those because he's not healthy. Because that is not Graham Gano. It's not a coincidence that he's hurt and he's missing field goals. But what do you got?
Uh, it was an extra point. I mean, that kick
Yeah.
at the end on the 4th and 1 was what, 35 yards? It's
Hmm.
basically an extra point, and line up in the middle of the field. I know it was rainy. I don't think it was much more than that. Look, I get the criticism of Dable on that. I can totally see, like, if you know that Gano is hurt, you've seen him miss kicks today, at least the one kick, and he's not feeling right, maybe, that your best bet with, was it a minute 26 left in the game or something like that?
Yeah, something
Um,
like that.
is maybe just if you get one more yard, the game's over.
Yep.
So just the way Saquon Barkley was running the ball in the second half, you have to
Running
believe
really
that you
well
could,
right there.
yeah, just you have to believe you get the push to get the 1 yard. At the same time, you kick a field goal. I mean, at that point, the lead seems almost insurmountable for the Jets. So I don't know. I feel like if they went for it on 4th and 1 and the Jets stopped them and we got the same result, the discussion would be much worse, right? I mean, I think he took the points and his kicker missed the
Yeah.
kick. But I understand your point that, Gano's hurt. But
Mhm.
here's the thing, like, if you're so hurt, why are you playing? That if you can't
Yeah.
function, I don't, is that on Dable or is that on Joe Shane? Like, who is that on? So I don't know. Like, like if he's not good enough to play, they should have been bringing in other kickers this week to play today. So
Yeah.
I I don't know. I don't know who to blame. At the end of the day, like I think I don't think he made a bad decision. I just think it didn't work out.
Mhm.
I don't know what else
And
to say.
yeah, and I don't necessarily know if, put that Dable or Shane or whoever, but like, I don't know, there's like some sort of notion that it's like Graham Gano's job to like say that he can't make the kick. Like, that's just not how it works. He told you that he needs knee surgery. At that point, like he's struggling. It's your job to pull the plug on the player. It's not the player's job to pull themselves out of the game. That's just not how it works. You got to save these players from themselves. And I personally had no trust at all that even in a chip shot that was going in, I've lost trust at this point. So when it didn't go in, I was irate. Um, but I get where you're coming from as well. Then I mean the other part of it, with a lot of people are talking about was um, the offensive play calling with Dable coaching not to lose. I think you and I, at least when we were up, have a similar viewpoint on this. Um, that when you're up in a game where nobody's offense can do anything, you're in the fourth quarter continuing to and you have your third string quarterback in there, continuing to just hand the ball off to your superstar running back, drain at worst, run it 3 times, drain clock, and punt it and let your defense do the work. At best, you continue to get first downs and you run out the game and move the ball and drain as much time as you can. I know some people had issues with us not passing at all there. I personally thought, given the circumstances, I thought that was the right call when we were up. Well, where were you on that?
Yeah, people are like, if you are not passing, you're not trying, and I'm thinking to myself, it's Tommy DeVito, and I
Yeah.
know that the Giants fan base has a love affair with Tommy DeVito. I understand he's a local kid, went to Don Bosco Prep, good local story, had a good showing in preseason, but there's a reason he was a UDFA. There's a reason he had to play at Syracuse and transfer for his 5th year at Illinois. Um, they just don't have a lot of confidence in Tommy DeVito pulling off a passing attack with this offensive line, which was again atrocious. Something we can talk about.
Yep.
Asking him to stand back there with the line like crumbling, trying to read through progressions against a really great Jets defense in secondary. It just seemed risky. And again, once Saquon got the Giants the lead at 10-7, the way the game was going, I mean, you can't tell me you were watching that game and not thinking 10-7 felt like a 20-point lead with the way the defenses were dominating. Like the offenses on both sides couldn't do anything. And the Jets especially were completely inept until the very, very end. So I don't know. I thought he was, in my opinion, Dable knew what he had in DeVito, and he also knew what he had on the other side with Zach Wilson. He was putting the ball in Zach Wilson's hand as opposed to
Yeah.
Tommy DeVito's hand, which I thought was the right play personally. I didn't think that was a problem.
Yeah. But then I guess the other side of that came where I agree. I didn't really have a problem with the way they called that in the fourth quarter. But I think where I think you can have more of a problem with it is when you decide to take the ball first in overtime and then you run out with that play calling
Yeah,
where
that I have a problem with.
yeah, it's that was ridiculous. I mean, you're better off in my opinion just running the ball at that point because you were just throwing screens everything you were afraid to. And granted, I don't know how much of that was us just calling a screen or as much as us leaving an outlet for Tommy DeVito and him afraid to throw to other targets. I'd have to
Mm.
look at the all 22 after this. They didn't really have a good view of what was developing downfield, but it seemed at the time that they were trying to design it to go to Saquon, at
It
least
looked like
from what I could see.
those are all, in my opinion, those are all design plays to Saquon on the first read because they were very quick reads and passes. It wasn't like he was scanning the field and checking down. They were like,
Yeah.
so we had arguments on Spaces about this, like should you take the ball, should you not in that space? And it was interesting. Like our friend Ivan, who runs like the best Spaces on Twitter, base 718 for those of you who want to follow him. He runs all the best Twitter Spaces. He started a space when Kayvon got the sack to get the ball back with 126 or whatever it was, thinking the game was over. And I was out and I was watching the game and outside, and I told him like, "Hey, the Jets are driving down the field and they're about to score." And he was like, "Really?" Because he left his house, he thought the game was over. Um,
No.
and when they tied it, and he and I were discussing before the kick, like we thought the Giants should have deferred. Like
Mhm.
if they won the coin toss, our opinion was kick the ball off. And some people thought it was completely insane and sacrilege to say that, but it was the flow of the game where like the offenses were not moving the ball. And it was sort of, we were saying, you know what? The defense is playing so well, the offense is so bad. Play the field position game, kick the ball, stop them with your defense, trust your defense, get the ball back in better field position, get close for a field goal and win.
Mhm.
Um, and people said, no, you have to try to win. I understand the mentality, but you got to take the ball to win. So the Giants win the coin toss. They take the ball, which you would do 99 out of 100 times, obviously,
Yeah.
other than maybe this circumstance. But then they call those plays. And my argument
Yeah,
is
that's for sure.
if you're going to rely on the sequence was a first read throw to the flat to Saquon Barkley that got I think 2 yards, and then there was a holding call on that play. All
Mhm.
right, even if it's successful, it got like 2 yards. You're like 2nd and 8, and then I think two consecutive screens to Saquon, which looked like first read screens with him running out. One of them was, I think, behind the line of scrimmage. The last play on third down was basically I don't know what it was supposed to be, but it looked like he just threw the ball. He's lucky he didn't get intercepted, where he just threw the ball into the line of scrimmage. I don't know if it was supposed to
Mhm.
be a design screen or whatnot to Saquon, but if those are your play calls and your designs, and that's your level of trust in Tommy DeVito, you should have just kicked the ball off and trusted your
Yep.
defense to get you in better field position. Because if you're closer, at least then you could rely on Saquon Barkley to get you the rest of the yardage, and see if you can get in field goal range. But didn't work out. What can you say?
Yeah, and I think I'll look, Brian Dable did not have a good game. This was not a good game coaching for him. There's a few things we could bring up because, both those missed field goals were what on 4th and 1. The first one was on a 4th and 1 as well.
Yeah.
So you can bring that up as well, and that was on the opponent's side of the field. There's really no trust in your offense to go for it. Ultimately, I think a lot of this comes back to just your trust in the quarterback. And, when we saw Brian Dable most aggressive as when he has trust his quarterback. Even last year, when he had trust in Daniel Jones, he was really going for those. He'd put the ball in his hands, and he would know either he's going to run for it or he's going to find a check down. And he trusted him in those situations. That
Yep.
hasn't been the case this year. You saw it a ton in Buffalo. They went for it all the time because they put it in Josh Allen's hands and they knew he could get it. And I think right now we're running into a situation where we don't have good quarterback play, and it is, I mean, among other things. But in this game, obviously, post not that Tyrod was doing anything special, but post Tyrod going out, you didn't have an NFL quarterback anymore, and it was evident that we we couldn't run an offense. It was very, very similar to like the Jake Fromm days where we had negative passing yards, I think, in one of those days too, not in the same way this, but technically with interceptions and things like that. It was negative.
It was bad, man. The offense has scored a grand total of 95 points this year in 8 games. That's a little under. Uh, what is that? A little under 12 points a game. We're on a historic pace.
Yeah.
Our our point differential is -92, the worst in the NFL. But the good news is the Patriots are closing fast. They're at -90 because our defense is actually keeping teams down. Our differentials are closing compared to the beginning of the year. Um,
Yeah, it's
but
been
worst
luck.
point differential, lowest points, 2-6. If there's a positive to take away from this game, it's the defense, the way they played again. They've been dominant, specifically Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter
Shout
Lawrence.
out
Those two.
Kayvon Thibodeau.
Kayvon
Those
Thibodeau this week. Yeah, man. Let me give you the intro and I'll let you break that. I know you want to get into this, but
go
as
for it.
I'm sure everybody knows that earlier this week, Carl Banks was on the Sal Licata and Brandon Tierney show on WFAN, and they were giving him the business about Kayvon Thibodeau. He basically calling out Kayvon for not being a presence, not being a performer. I think Carl was trying to explain to them that he was doing his responsibilities as per Wink and his assignments. They just went off and off and kept saying things like he doesn't look like Micah Parsons out there and this and that. Well, I think we know Kayvon saw that because he replied to Giant fans that he appreciated them having his back essentially.
Yep.
Comes out today. Kayvon Thibodeau had 9 tackles, 6 solos, 3 sacks, 3 tackles for a loss, 3 quarterback hits, a forced fumble leading to a Giants turnover. And he had 2 sacks, as you mentioned, on what should have been the final drive of the Jets,
Yep.
losing a closeout sack, what should have been a closeout sack on 4th down. He was showing incredible ability with his moves on the line of scrimmage. Like the first sack where he caused the fumble, he goes to an outside move. He uses his hands to swat away the left tackle, flies around him, pursues Zach Wilson from the backside like a lion chasing prey, and just absolutely destroys him, takes the ball away. Jihad Ward falls on it. He was doing that from the left defensive end spot, the right defensive end spot. He was using all sorts of hand moves, double moves. It was a thing of beauty. It was like watching Kayvon Thibodeau at his height at Oregon dominating Pac-12 offenses. So it was amazing to watch. What are your thoughts on the defense, Monty, and Kayvon specifically?
Hearing you talk about Kayvon's making me all giddy. he was
Ah,
he was he
he's
was so he was so
he.
good, man. Fuck
That's the
those
that's the, that's
WFAN clowns.
that's the guy we drafted. That's the guy from
That
Oregon.
exactly, dude. And look, I'm not going to like say that Kayvon didn't have a slow start to this year. He did. And yes, he has not been a total dominating presence every single game. He's succeeded in like different ways. It hasn't shown up necessarily like in the pass rush win rate like it did his rookie year, but he's been getting pressures. He's been getting sacks. Those fucking WFA clowns are like, oh, we're talking about pressures now. Yeah. Okay, what about what happened to sacks? What do you mean sacks? He was already top 10 in the NFL in sacks. Know where he is now? He's top 3 in the NFL in sacks. You want to talk about Micah Parsons? He's ahead of Micah Parsons in sacks. He's ahead of Nick Bosa in sacks. He's ahead of Myles Garrett in sacks. Like, look, those guys are all still better players than Kayvon Thibodeau. Don't get me wrong, but Kayvon Thibodeau has been putting on a fucking clinic these
Yep.
last like 4 or 5 games. He is on track for 18 sacks on the year. He has what 8.5 right now? Is that what it is?
8.5,
What
yeah.
what's the most sacks anyone's ever had in Wink Martindale's defense? I would think
Nine
is
and a
it
half.
8.5, maybe nine, eight and a
I think
half?
it
Is
was.
that
I
what?
think it was. I think it was 9.5. It was Matthew
9.5.
Judon.
So he's
Yeah.
1 sack off of the all-time record in Wink Martindale's defense by Matthew Judon, one of the greatest defenders in the NFL, and it's fucking week 8. Like, are you like this is the guy we're getting on. I don't want to hear any more fucking Kayvon Thibodeau slander. And I understood it from people who could back it up. Like, this is not coming out of guys like talking Giants guys. I totally understood what they meant, and they had a lot backing up. They were mostly harping on, it just not being a consistent thing. His pass rush win rate was way down, but at some point, it's his production is showing up, and he's being an impact player now. It's honestly, he's giving me some, and somebody said this on timeline to me. He's giving me some like OC Minora vibes with how he's impacting the game. He's getting his impact in like doses, but when he impacts the game, his presence is felt.
Yeah. and he was impacting the run game too.
Yes,
Like
he was.
there were some stops on Brees Hall where he blows back the left tackle and destroys the running lane, and then takes down Brees Hall. So, yeah, he was doing his job. He was dominating from the end, as a defensive end, as an edge, and pass rush and the run game. He was just dominating the whole game. Dexter Lawrence. I mean, it's just a weekly occurrence. 15 pressures. 15. How is that even possible,
He
like,
got
in one game?
15 pressures.
It's either 15 or 14. I don't know what the official number is, but it's either 14,
Jesus
15 or 14.
Christ.
I think he had only one sack. I'll look it up
Didn't even
here.
see that. That's insane.
Yeah, I'll pull up his numbers here.
Yeah, pull it up. But
Dex
that's
Dexter
nuts.
runs
He
like
had like
one
8 last
sack, one
week.
tackle. Yeah, I mean they don't have the official numbers up yet, but I saw the posted number somewhere. I forgot who posted it. It was on Twitter. I saw it. It was
Yeah,
either
they did that
14.
last week, so I'm sure somebody posted
Yeah,
it.
it was either 14 or 15 pressures.
Fucking insane.
And to be honest, it looked like 20. Like he was in
Yeah.
the backfield the whole damn game.
I mean, to be fair, they were on what, their third
They're
center at one point.
I think they're fourth string center because Joe
Because
Tippmann didn't
Pittman would be a
play,
backup at
and then
some point.
McGovern
Yeah.
got hurt, and then the guy backing up McGovern got hurt. So they had, I don't know who was snapping the ball at one point. That poor guy fumbled the ball in his first snap. Remember? Yeah,
Yeah, Mikey McFadden got a fumble recovery. Shout out
right.
Mikey McFadden.
So there was that, but still, I mean, 14, 15 pressures in one game. Um, Nick Villado posted the video. I don't know if you saw it. It's brutal. On the overtime 3rd and 10 completion to from Zach Wilson to Garrett Wilson. Did you see what happened? Dexter
No,
Lawrence got held like horrifically. It was a
uh,
ridiculous hold. Like literally, he beats the center. The center just grabs his arm and yanks him, and his body's going one direction, his arm's going the other direction. So that was a missed holding call. Oh, and by the way, on Brees Hall's touchdown, that great play by Brees Hall, Kayvon got held on that. I don't know if you noticed.
yeah,
Um,
you text me about that.
go watch it again. Kayvon gets around the left tackle. He's bearing down on Wilson. He's about to sack him, and then you see, like, as he turns the edge, he's actually going around him from behind. He's nearing Zach Wilson, and then his arm is getting pulled backwards by the tackle, and then Wilson gets the ball off. So, like, both of these were like people's arms literally flailing backwards from overt holding, and the refs missed it. But nothing to take away from those guys. They dominate. Dexter Lawrence is a freak. I love the guy. What's not to love? Kayvon Thibodeau's coming on like the guy we drafted. He's a monster. The defense has been great. Just great. Michael McFadden, another good game. Fumble recovery. It wasn't his best game, but he's solid, man. He's where he's supposed to be. He makes good tackles. Um, they both
Fabio
both
Carrique had a good game. 3 tackles
yeah.
for loss. Led the
I mean,
team in
okay,
tackles.
both Carrick and McFadden, like, lost footing on the Brees Hall touchdown. Those look kind of ugly, but
Mhm.
that was one play. I mean, it's a bad play, but it was one play. They played a good game. The defense was amazing. Deontay Banks, this kid traveled with Garrett Wilson. He's a rookie. Did you hear
Yep,
about this? He went to his coach and said, "I want to travel with Wilson."
that's awesome. You
And
love to
he
hear shit like that.
and yes, Garrett Wilson had a great game. Don't take anything. He had a great game,
Yeah,
but for a rookie corner to say, "I've got this. Let me handle this assignment," the confidence that's got to instill in the rest of the guys in secondary. Like, all right, whatever happens with Garrett Wilson, Deontay will handle it. We got to take care of these other guys. It makes their life easier. And you know what? The defense played great.
yeah. And it just I know that Banks had like Wilson had a good game on Banks, but I don't know, it never felt like Banks was getting his ass kicked. It always felt like he was always right there and he was never a liability despite, Wilson having a good game.
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
Adoree really shit the bed on us on one of those
well,
passes downfield.
the one that basically ended the game in
Yep,
overtime, the pass interference where he just didn't look back and just ran into, was it Lazard on that
thanks.
play? I forgot who it was. Yeah. So talking about Adoree is a good segue to where we need to go with this discussion.
Yeah.
Now the unfun stuff. The Giants, after 8 weeks, are 2-6. The New York Times, I've mentioned this site before. The Upshot on the New York Times is a site that does a lot of statistical analysis for people who are stats junkies. The Upshot, run by Nate Cohn, 538, run by Nate Silver. These guys are stat and probability gurus. They run incredible models. both for politics and for sports. Well, the Upshot has an NFL playoff probability chart. It's actually got a simulator. It's fun to play with like what your team's chances will be if they won this game, lost that game, this and that. But as it stands, the Giants have a 2-6 have a 1% chance. One, like Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
1% chance of making the playoffs. And the trade deadline is in less than 2 days. It's at 4
Yep.
p.m. on Tuesday. The Giants are down to their third string quarterback. They have a 1% chance of making the playoffs. They're 2-6. Daniel Jones's future is there's some reports coming out about his neck. I don't even want to get into it other than to say it's not sounding reassuring. Let's just leave it at that. Tyrod Taylor is in the hospital tonight with some sort of injury to his ribs. I mean, it
Yep.
sounds bad. Tommy DeVito is not allowed to throw the football, and he's our starting quarterback now.
Yeah.
So, Joe Shane, what are you doing? Let's talk about it. We got less than 2 days left. What are you doing tonight, Monty, if you're Joe Shane?
I'm calling up my buddy Brandon Bean and trying to get a deal to send some guys over to Buffalo because they have some needs right in places of where we need to make some moves. They could use Dory Jackson. They could use Leonard Williams. They could use Saquon Barkley. And let's see what they want from us, and let's see if we can work something out with his old buddy over there.
The Giants have $1.3 million in cap space. They don't have enough to get through the season. And they're going to need a quarterback at this point, among who knows what else. They have to do something to open up cap space. So they have two choices. They can start trading away some players to free up some space, which I think obviously is the logical thing to do. Or they can restructure contracts and push some money till the future, which seems kind of irrational and crazy at this point.
Yeah.
So the big money deals. Let's start at the top. So I sent in one of the chats my estate sale list.
Yeah.
I knew you would enjoy that. In my opinion, I know people think I'm crazy because I've been beating I've been beating this story and this drum for a long time now. But we know there are not usually a lot of deals at the deadline, but this is a great draft class. That's what our pod's about. It's a great draft class. We only have 6 picks. The Giants are in a uniquely awful situation. Like, I mean, uniquely awful. They are down to their third string quarterback, and there is no timetable for when their starting quarterback is ever returning. And he may have a career-threatening injury. They have a 1% chance of making the playoffs. Like, it doesn't get any better than this if you're trying to get like a solid answer to should I be selling. It doesn't get any clearer than this. It's almost like the football gods are sending a message to Joe Shane, like, get your head firmly out of your ass and understand what's happening in front of you and start making some deals. I don't know how else to say it at this point. Like, you need to start making some deals. So the list is long, in my opinion, of tradable players, and I would dangle all of them and see what happens. Leonard Williams is owed about $9 million through the rest of the year. That's it for the team acquiring him. That's not his cap hit. People are going to reply with, "Oh, he's a $32 million cap hit. You can't trade him." That's his cap hit to the Giants is not the same as the financial liability to the team that would be acquiring him. That's only his residual remaining salary for the season, which is $9 million. And to be totally honest, the Giants could easily move that for a good football player in Leonard Williams and say, "We'll eat half of it. We'll pay $4.5 million of it." So you get Leo for $4.5 million, which is an absolute steal in exchange for better draft compensation for a team that's
And we're
going
still
for it.
saving money.
Yeah, and you're still making enough money to get through the season. Just that one move. Just that half of Leonard Williams' contract would get you through the season. Easily.
While you eat half of it, you're still saving $4.5 million.
Right. It would get you up to $6 million in cap saving into cap dollars the rest of the year. You're good. You're done for the year, basically. You don't do anything. You don't do anything else. You do that one move. You get through this year. You actually save some money probably by the end of the year, and you get some draft capital. I think Leonard Williams is probably worth, in my opinion, a 3rd-round pick, maybe a 4th-round pick, but in that territory. But if somebody calls you and says, "Hey, we'll give you a 5th and a 6th, or we'll give you a 4th and a 6th," or something, I think that's the kind of deal that could happen. What are your thoughts on that one?
I'll say if I was a competing team who could use interior defensive linemen with pass rush ability, and I heard the Giants called offered to pay half his salary and only wanted a third round pick for Leonard Williams and they didn't pull the trigger, I'd be pretty mad at my team over that.
Yeah.
Like you can get a third round comp pick for this guy. Like that's what smart teams would do.
Right.
You 4.5 million is a steal for what he could offer for your team for the rest of the year. That's the type of guy who could help put your defensive line over the top. It I it feels like if you're willing to be flexible on the salary cap to get, something done and get a good return on him, it feels like that should be out there. I don't know, but in my mind, he has that type of value if your team is competing. Leonard Williams is a damn good player.
Yep. I agree. So that should be number one is Leonard Williams. Like I think that's because not only because of the money saved, but because he probably gets you back the best draft compensation. Um, Saquon Barkley would be in that conversation, but they've already publicly come out and said we're not trading Saquon Barkley. So I'm just not gonna discuss it because I think
I get that.
it's logical that he should be traded, but this organization is illogical when dealing with this matter. So let's leave it at that.
It
I'll
could
be
very well
surprised.
be an owner thing. We don't know. Just
Right. It's just not going to happen. I would be absolutely besides myself shocked if he's not a Giant at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. So it would be the talk of the town, obviously, if that happens. So let's not talk about that. It's probably not going to happen. But Adoree Jackson, he's another one. Adoree Jackson has an $11 million contract with half the season left. So let's say he's got about $5.5 million or so,
yep.
roughly 5 million, 5.5 million left on his contract. He hasn't had the best year so far, but he's also playing out of position. He's probably hurt his value. If I'm Adoree, I want to get out of here and go somewhere that's a competitor, so I have a chance to rebuild my value up before I hit free agency. Certainly, I think he should be incentivized to do that. The writing is certainly on the wall with him on the Giants in terms of where they prioritize him. An acquiring team for a 28-year-old boundary man corner, a very valuable asset. Can you get a fourth? Is it more like a fifth? What are you thinking for Adoree Jackson? Because you're only paying about 5 million. That's
Yeah.
assuming the Giants don't need anything.
So, I mean, first off, I'll say I think Adoree Jackson is the trade piece. I think that is the guy who makes the most sense, who I think teams will be looking to trade for just because cornerback depth is so important in this league, especially if you want to be a Super Bowl contender. The money is not that high. You see cornerbacks moved around a good bit. So as far as to your question about the compensation, I could see a fourth. I think fifth is probably more realistic, but I think I could see something along the lines of, which honestly I think be better for the Giants, would be like a fifth and a seventh or something. Then you get two draft picks. You go up from 6 to 8. You recover that seventh round pick you're missing, and you still get, a fifth round pick in the neighborhood of that pick that you'd be getting for Adoree Jackson, but you get it this year. I think that's the type of deal I'd probably be looking for Adoree Jackson.
In this scenario, do you think the Giants would have to eat any money of that 5 million or so?
Um, I think the thing with Adoree Jackson is that maybe the Giants would eat a little bit to get it done, but I think it's a little bit different than Leonard Williams, where it's like it's almost like something you have to do to trade Leonard Williams. It like just for people to take on that money at this point in the season. There's not a lot of teams that have that. Though I think he's worth $9 million, I don't think a lot of teams have $9 million just laying around. While in the Dory Jackson's case, I do think a team could fit him onto their salary cap. So, um, I don't know. It feels a little bit different there because it's like, yeah, we could eat some, but like you're gonna have to up the offer. Like it's not like it's almost like that has to get worked out first in the Leonard Williams case. Well, that's like a okay, but also fine, we'll do that. What else you gonna give us type of thing. So, um, it just depends on the team, I guess I would say.
So, in an ideal scenario for the Giants trading for assets, it sounds like you think you can see both Leo and Adoree getting traded, maybe eating half of Leo's money. So you save about 4.5 there, saving all of Adori's money, so you're closer to like 9.5 million or so, maybe 10 million. Um, and you get back the equivalent of a third, and then maybe a fifth and a seventh, or something along those lines. Does that sound about right for those two?
Yeah,
Would that
yeah,
feel like if you traded both those guys and you walked away with $11 million in cap savings for this year, and a third and a fifth and a seventh, would you consider that a victorious process until by Tuesday afternoon?
yeah. I'd be thrilled. But the tough thing with Leonard Williams, I think specifically, you're gonna have to be really aggressive to trade him at this point in this process. I don't know if they've had any preliminary talks about him, but at this point, you're gonna have to be very aggressive to get a deal done with Leonard Williams. And maybe how you're aggressive is just offering to eat that half his salary off the bat when you're making these trades.
That's why I
Maybe
meant.
that.
I mean, that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah, because at this
Look,
point, I think that's how you almost have to approach it. Because like, there's not enough teams that have that type of money. So it's just, hey, we're looking to trade Leonard Williams. We'll eat half his salary. Will you do this? Like,
well, so the Commanders have put both Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the trade market supposedly, and the rumor has it they were offered a third round pick already for Montez Sweat. I don't know what his contract. It can't be that crazy, like different. Like he's probably on. Is he on? He's on his 50-year option, I believe, right? So
um,
he was a first round pick. So
yes,
yeah,
yes, yeah,
he's the same year as Dexter Lawrence.
yep.
So what is a fifth year option for an edge rusher? What's he making? Like 15 million or something this year? Let me see.
Yeah, it's gonna be
He's
all
making 16.
salary.
He's making. What is
Oh,
he
no,
making?
yeah,
I'm gonna look it up real quick.
he's making 11.5, and it's all salary.
All right. So there's probably, the team would be acquiring 5.5 there. So that again, like they're a team was looking to eat 5.5 million on him. You can make Leo available for cheaper, and is Montez Sweat is an edge rusher. They're not the same, but the point is impactful defensive linemen who can rush the passer. I mean, I would probably put Leo and Montez Sweat in a similar category of relative value to a team. I don't, yeah, I don't know if you would put them very differently. I think Leo's a little better at what he does than Montez Sweat is what he does. I think Montez Sweat's position carries a little bit higher value, but overall, I think it's fairly similar. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I first my immediate reaction was like Montez Sweat has more value, but I mean, this guy's an edge rusher who's never had double digit sacks. He's 27 years old compared to Leonard Williams, 29
29.
years old. Leonard, and yes, he plays a more premium position, but I don't know how true that is anymore. I mean, look at like what these interior defensive linemen are being paid, especially the ones with pass rush
It's a
ability. Like,
marginal difference.
would it surprise you at all if Leonard Williams got paid more than Montez Sweat on an open market,
I think they're
at
going to
least
get
from an
almost
AAV stand level?
no, and in fact, I'm willing to bet that they're going to get almost the same money on the open market. I think
I
they'll
agree.
both be
It's
in
gonna be
the
significant.
it'll be like in somewhere in the 16 to 18 million per year range, somewhere
Yep.
in there on average for the both of them. So again, they probably have comparable value. So if Montez Sweat can get you a third, what can Leonard Williams get you? Probably close to a third. And again, Montez Sweat, you're going to have to eat, 5.5 million, assuming that that's all you take. You're taking on the whole remaining contract, and the Giants could make Leonard Williams deal so that the team acquiring him takes on something like that, right? 4.5, 5 million. So I don't know how hard it would be to move Leo, honestly. I really think if you put him on the market and you make calls in earnest to teams that need D line pass rush help, he's a difference maker. He's a difference maker for a competitor trying to win a Super Bowl this year. So I wouldn't close the door on that. If they don't trade him, I truly believe it's because they choose not to trade him, as opposed to they had a hard time finding a buyer.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just how much they're willing to bend at this point to get it done for me. It's tough. It's a tough move to sell Leonard Williams. I think it's to me it's a no-brainer to get it done, but you just don't see a lot of these trades done around the trade deadline. And we've been hearing about guys like Montez Sweat and Chase Young being shopped for like a week now, and to turn around and try to get something done with Leonard Williams.
Well,
possibly.
Okay, but at the same time, we're talking about organizations that it's being reported. We're saying we want to see if we win the next game before we make a decision on whether or not to trade him. That's what bad teams do. The Commanders are a bad organization. I mean, they're probably going to change in the ownership, but right now they're still a bad organization. The Giants, that's the point. They shouldn't be a bad organization. You shouldn't hinge decision making on whether or not we won or lost this Jets game. You know, it's a crazy way to do business. But we are here at a point where they should be looking at this, and the point is, I think these guys have value. I agree. Adoree is a slam dunk. Like if you don't move Adoree, you're just not even trying. Like
Yeah, I'll
this
be
should be
mad if they
easy,
don't move Adoree.
But I think Leo is a guy who carries a lot of value. I think if you move those two, I would be thrilled. I think you can get 2 to 3 picks back. You could probably get at least one third, and if not one third, you can get a couple of fourths and something extra, which is solid value for those two and the cap relief. And that money not only does it help you get through this year, but if whatever you don't use, you can forward it to next year as savings, and it helps you, right? I think
Yep.
a portion of it goes to next year. I don't think the whole thing does, right? It's not dollar for dollar. I think it's
No, it's dollar for dollar. It's just you can only carry over a certain percentage of your total cap.
right. Um, okay, so that means you do save that money.
Yep.
So it'll help with decision making for next year too. So I just think those are two no brainer decisions. There are a couple of other guys who are worth discussing. Unless you have any other thoughts on Adore and Leo.
No, not really. It's just those two are definitely the guys that if if those two get traded, it's a slam dunk, like good trade deadline for us.
And by the way, like potential targets for Leo are pretty much any team that needs any pass rush help going into the playoff push. So I'm thinking teams like Detroit, um, maybe a team like Seattle that's on the bubble trying to get in.
Yep.
You go to the AFC, a team like the Dolphins could probably use some pass rush help. Um, I don't think the Bills necessarily need defensive line help, but they are getting guys banged up.
Yeah.
So, there's at least some room there. Um, I haven't checked in on what's going on with the Chiefs. I know the Ravens are pretty much solid up there. Um, but the Bengals, these are all teams, Jacksonville. They're teams that are out there that could probably use a rental to help them in their pass rush.
Yeah, for sure.
So
There's a lot of teams that could use his services.
So I think you'll find a buyer. And Adore, like we keep mentioning Buffalo, but there's probably more teams than Buffalo. There's probably at least 3 or 4 teams out there that would gladly take a corner. For example, the 49ers. The 49ers have one corner. They have a great defense, but Shavarius Ford is essentially it. Like a lot of the other guys are rotational. So would they give you something for Adore? Probably. I think you'd call them. Um, but those are the big two. You got other guys that we could trade, and these names are not discussed as much, but I think they're worth mentioning. So number one, a guy nobody talks about a lot, a relatively new addition to the Giants, Ashawn Robinson. Um, so he's been playing well. I should start with that. He's been good. He hasn't been great, but he never was I wouldn't call him a great player. I think he was a good rotational defensive lineman. Ashawn Robinson, I'm going to look up his salary, but I think we paid him what, 8 million for this year, something like that. Do you remember? Um,
That sounds right. Either 6 or 8 million, something around there.
Let me look up his number. 8.5. No, I'm sorry, that was last year. He is making such a weird contract. 5 million. I'm sorry. So he had 5 million with 4 guaranteed at signing. So his salary is not that much. You're not saving a ton. And you've pretty much already eaten the dead cap on it at 4 million. So he's not going to save you really any money. But could you get something for Ashawn Robinson? I mean, is it even worth considering? What do you think?
Probably not, to be honest with you. I maybe pick swap in 2025. Like, I think what you're gonna get is like a 2025, like 7th for 6th, maybe. Like,
That might not
that's
be
the best case scenario, I'd say.
right. So you may as well just hold on to him.
Yeah. I mean,
Which
like,
is
look, if somebody wants to offer you that, you're not really in a position, like, sure, take them type of thing. I get it, but like, it's just like it's if you get a call on him, I'm not spending my time trying to shop him.
I got you. Let's move on. Um, Here's a fun one. a guy who got hurt today within like a few plays and didn't come back. Darren Waller all week had a hamstring issue. He was listed as I think he was listed as limited or did not, or questionable in practice all week. He played, and then he quickly hurt his hamstring, and then he was ruled out of the game like that. Like it was bizarre. Like he was just
Yeah,
out of the game immediately,
that
which
was
I thought was strange.
unfortunate.
And then he was just sitting on the sideline. I'm like, how? I couldn't understand what was happening. In any case, he's under contract. As you guys know, we gave up the 100th overall pick, right? A comp third to get him, and he still this year is owed not much money, like another 500,000 or so. But beyond that, he has no guaranteed money, none, and he has what 22, like about 36, 37 million left on his deal over the next 3 years, 36.7 million, something like that, over the next few years, or 35
He
million or so.
he does
Hmm?
have a little bit of dead money. He has about 7, like a 7 and or half to 8, something like
So
that, because
he has
of the
7.3 dead for
restructuring.
us, right? The
Yeah,
Giants are
yeah,
going to eat that dead money, but in terms of guaranteed money to the team acquiring him, it's just his
oh,
base.
yeah, no, they won't acquire anything. But yeah, if we move him, we'll have to eat about 8 million.
Right. It's not too bad. So you're talking about, let's say, the equivalent of 35, $36 million remaining for 3 years of control of a damn good tight end who on the right offense is probably like a top five tight end in the NFL, top five to top seven, something like that. Um, this is tricky. You have him under control. You very well may be drafting a young quarterback next year. Do you want that young quarterback to have Darren Waller? Or do you explore Darren Waller and see what you can get for him? So what are your thoughts on him, Monty?
I'm not picking up the phone unless it's a 3rd round pick, personally.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason moving him now, but based off of how many years of control we have on him and the potential of drafting a quarterback where we might want a weapon like Darren Waller for him. If they call me as a 3rd round pick, that's definitely something I have to consider, and take a look at the free agency coming up and the draft, and see what type of routes I can go to make sure my quarterback next year is going to have options around him. But uh, short of a third, I wouldn't pick it. I wouldn't do it, and I don't know if you'd get that. Where are you?
Yeah, I agree. I'm probably not making calls for this with the limited time we have left. I
Mhm.
mean, I think in the middle of a call to somebody else or about another player, I might say, "Do you have any interest in Darren Waller?" And see what I can get, because you have him under control. But if somebody picks up the phone and says, "You guys are 2-6, I need your tight end. What's it going to take?" and you say, "Well, make me your best offer," and the guy comes back with, "We'll offer you a third and a fifth, or a third round, something like that, or a third and a sixth, third and a pick swap, something like that, to sweeten the deal to get it done." Um, it's still not 100% easy to do because you still have to replace, production at some point.
Yeah,
Um, and it's not easy to replace Darren Waller in a third with a third round pick. However, um, I will say that while it's not a great tight end class, I do think there are good tight ends who could be drafted in this draft, on day three. Um, and they don't have to be like superstars, but I think they'll be solid. And I'm a big believer in Daniel Bellinger still. I
yeah.
think
So
he's
that
a
was
very good
I was
player.
gonna add,
Yeah,
like,
I think you're in a position where you can make this move.
because you have Darren, then you have Daniel Bellinger walking into that position. I guess what you're
Correct.
considering when when you're trading a Darren Waller is not only are you getting a 3rd round pick, what you got, back from him. He has a cap hit of 14.5,
Yeah, you save money in the
15.5,
future.
and 17.5. So that's money you can use towards signing a free agent, on
Right.
top of the 3rd round pick you're getting. So I'm
Right.
not, again, with that said, I'm not sold at that, but I would consider it for all those reasons considered.
I think you're right. Then this is one of those situations where somebody calls you and says, "What are you doing with Waller?" You got to listen, but it's got to be a high price. Like I'm not
Yeah.
selling him with all the years of
I'm
control
not
unless the
selling
price.
I'm not selling for less than what I bought him for.
Exactly, with all the control you have. I agree. Um, Next guy on the list, I feel like I'm running an estate sale. I really do.
Yeah.
Uh, Darius Slayton. I
Mhm.
jokingly said in Spaces, I was like, you got to sell him. Our friend Wes Steinberg got a kick out of this. He was enjoying my commentary in the Spaces. He's become
Shout
a
out Wes.
frequenter of our space. Wes, I hope you listen to the pod. I know you liked us. Um, so we'll protect your identity, I promise. But he laughed when I wrote like sell Darius because who's throwing him the football? Can I say that yet? Daniel Jones, I don't know if he's ever coming back. Tyrod Taylor looked like he football died on the field. Poor guy. He's
What?
in the hospital tonight. My terminology, sorry. Tommy DeVito is on a curfew. He's not allowed to throw the football. Who's throwing Darius Slayton the ball? He's got a 2-year deal.
Yeah.
The Giants are eating like whatever 5.25 dead cap or something this year. Very little next year. He's a better player than his contract would suggest, I would say. And I think he's a valuable player. He's 26 years old. Some team, I think, will find value in Darius. We know the Atlanta Falcons wanted him.
Mhm.
Um, would you trade him, and what would you get for him? Where would you price? Would you price Darius Slayton? Would you put a tag on him and see what you can get? And what would it be? What would your price be?
It's a good question. Um, I would trade Darius Slayton 100%. Um, I'd probably move him for a 6. I'd love to get a 5th. I'd probably move him for a 6.
Is it
I
crazy for
th
me to think you could get a fifth for Darius Slayton?
I don't think it's insane. I just think where we've seen a lot of these trades are just teams throwing like a 6-round pick at you for these players, and that's probably more in the territory, but I mean, look, the teams need wide receivers.
So,
They're constantly looking for them.
this is a guy. Mace will be so happy I said this. I upset him earlier. But this is a guy who last year had 46 receptions and 71 targets. He only started 11 games. He in those games, 724 yards. He did have only 2 touchdowns, but he was giving you what was the number? Yards per target? 10.2 yards per target, and 15.7 yards per reception. One of the highest in the NFL. He has decent separation numbers. He's obviously a speed threat. Um, his issue is really catch percentage, and he's at 56% this year, which is one of his lower numbers. But he was at 65% last year. I think in the right offensive system, this is a guy who is valuable as like a wide receiver 3 type. Yeah, I guess like top end, maybe a 5th round pick. Bottom end, maybe like a 6th or a 7th. If you got a 6th for him, um, I would be okay with that. Give me a 6th and a 7th the next year, something like that.
What it comes down to, man, is you save $6 million by cutting him this offseason. Are you gonna cut him or are you gonna keep him for 6 million? I wouldn't blame them either way in how they did it, but if
Yeah.
you're gonna cut him, then you probably should just take the trade. If you think that there's a better chance than not, you're gonna try to get that cap savings and cut Darius Slayton, then there's a team out there who will use Darius Slayton services. And honestly, 5th-round pick might be reasonable given the extra year of control they'll have on him. Uh, he's a good player, man. I mean, like, even, like, getting away from, like, contender, even a team like the Carolina Panthers who've been begging to get a wide receiver help in there. I could see something
Right.
like that. I'd
Right. I
take a
mean, a
6 from
team
the Panthers.
exactly like a team that just wants a good target, a speed target for a young quarterback, maybe.
Mhm.
And you can make the argument that if the Giants go get a young quarterback, couldn't Slayton help be that guy for us? And I think that's a valid argument.
Yeah.
I don't think he's without value at all. I'm just wondering what the price point would be at which you'd move him. 6 might be the number, or maybe they just say the best we can do is a 6. Let's just keep him. So I'm kind of agnostic about the Slayton issue, but it's a curious discussion because if you can get higher than 6, if you can get a 5th, I think you move him. That's how
Yeah.
I look at it.
I agree.
Let me see what else do I have. Paris Campbell, another wide receiver who does absolutely nothing for the Giants at this point.
Yep.
Um, this poor guy, man. Like, I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's him being on the Giants, but he came here on a 1 year deal, and this is not going to be good for his career. He's he has a 4.7 salary this year, 1 year deal. His base is 1.4. The Giants are going to eat 3 million in dead cap anyway. Um, he's owed maybe 700,000 through the rest of the year. What could you get for $700,000 worth of Paris Campbell?
I think you're looking at like a Cam Akers type trade here, where you're gonna get like a pick swap in like 2026, and you're gonna get like a seventh for a sixth round. I think that's what you're looking for with Paris Campbell. And if
So
somebody calls you saying, "Hey, will you give us Paris Campbell for some sort of pick swap?" I'd be like, "What do you got for me? Just send it over."
Well, I think that's kind of where we are.
Yeah.
Are there any other players you thought about that might be amenable to at least dangling?
So I'll mention the name, but I'm gonna preface where I don't really think we should move him right now. Aziz Ojolari is a name that people have mentioned. Um,
Yeah,
I don't see the point of doing it right now. You still have another year of control on him. Um, I He's been hurt. I think you try to let him get healthy and reestablish some value either to you or to another team. And maybe this offseason you can look into something like that based on what you want to do at the edge position. But I wouldn't do it right now with Aziz. But that is a name that I think is worth mentioning.
right before I got on, I was talking to our friend Don, and Don said, "Would you trade for Daniil Hunter right now?" And he dangled a trade. He said a third round pick plus Aziz Ojolari for Daniil Hunter an extension. Would you do it?
No,
You're saying no.
no, there's no shot.
You're not giving up a pick right now.
No, I'm not
No,
trading for people right now. It would
I agree.
if I'm trading for it, they have to be on a rookie contract and have another year of control left.
Yeah,
Otherwise, I have no interest. Firing
there you
deals,
go.
no thanks.
What if we call the Jets and no, I'm just kidding. Um, we took somebody on an expiring deal and then we could just franchise tag them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's just franchise. We'll figure it out later. Let
We'll
them
figure
build
out
up
five,
their value, then pay them.
and 4 years later we'll have the discussion all over again. Um,
I love
yeah,
Daniil Hunter, and I was for trading him before the
yeah, I was
season,
too.
but it's season's over.
Yeah. So I wouldn't trade Aziz right now. I think he's at low value. I think he still has value in the NFL. The guy's just had bad injury luck. Maybe that's how he is. But if he's edge three with a lower workload and you get an edge two this offseason, I do think that changes things. So
Yeah.
I'm holding on to watch him become edge three. Um, so there you have it. And by the way, we're not saying in discussing all these players, we expect the Giants to trade all these guys. Obviously, that is not going to happen. But I think this is one of those situations where, like, you can't just say, I'm only willing to trade one or two guys. Because if you go into it with that mentality, you may not trade anybody. I think you have to go into this and actually dangle, like, make a lot of phone calls and see who can be moved. And what do we discuss? One, two, three, four, five, I think six players, right? So if you're making calls about six players, maybe you get one of the big guys and one or two of the smaller ones to get traded, and you get your draft picks and you get your cap savings. I think that's the approach, but I do think that the Giants have to be open for business. That's the bottom line.
No, no, who we didn't even mention Xavier McKinney.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. How did I forget that one?
That's a big one.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about it because that deserves its own little segment here.
Yeah,
Xavier McKinney is having a solid year, not a great year. He's having a solid year. I believe. Does he have any interceptions yet?
I'll
I
check,
want
but
to
I don't
say.
think
I,
so.
I want to say no. He's owed basically nothing. He was a second round pick. He's in his fourth year, so he's basically owed like nothing at this point. Let me see. No, he doesn't have any interceptions. Um, this year so far, Xavier McKinney has no interceptions. He has six pass deflections, one forced fumble. He has 38 tackles, 30 solo tackles, which is solid. Eight assists. So he's never been a Pro Bowler. He's never been All Pro. His best year was in his second year where he played free safety in the Patrick Graham system, and he was able to accumulate five interceptions in 16 games. and he had 10 pass deflections that year. Um, he had one tackle for a loss. He had 93 tackles and 59 solos that year. He was all over the place, but he really has had a very, very average career as a Giant, other than that 1 year. His agent that he hired last year is David Mulugeta, who is known as essentially the premier agent for safeties. He gets these guys paid. I think he's Derwin James's agent, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm. Yes, he is.
Um, Xavier McKinney hired him because he wants to get paid.
Mhm.
I'm quite confident that Xavier McKinney values himself as being a guy who's in the top 10 of the NFL safety room and wants to be paid as such, which is probably somewhere between what, 12 to 18 million a year, something like
Something
that.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. On the low end 12, high end 18. So he's a free agent after this year. Some people will say, well, why don't you just franchise tag him? The franchise tag for a safety is $19 million. I cannot see the Giants doing that, putting a
Yeah.
19 million because he'll sign it. He'll be like, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gladly.
Uh, yeah. So if you're not going to tag him and he's going to hit the market unrestricted and he has an agent who wants to get him the most dollars, obviously, um, and his best production came out of a system that is very different than your current defensive system, I think you can make a strong case that he's not coming back. If you let him hit the market, he's not coming back.
Yeah.
So they don't have an extension with him yet. So barring an extension getting done by Tuesday with him, would you trade Xavier McKinney?
I would. I would trade him. Depends on the price though. I mean, I was kind of talk about going through here with the other ones. A third rounder would be a no brainer. I don't think you get a third rounder for Xavier McKinney just based off of the value of the
His
safety
production.
position.
Yeah.
Um, I think a fourth might be reasonable. Um, Maybe a fifth and like a sixth or something. Would I do it for those prices? Um, Maybe. I don't know. I think it's tough because what you mentioned was for fourth, I'd probably do it. Fourth and something, I definitely would. But you're basically gonna let him test the open market. You said you're not gonna tag him. He's gonna test the open market. And
What do you think he's worth?
it,
What do you think he'll get? Give me a number if he stays at this pace.
3 years, 30 million.
I think that's about right. And in fact, that's kind of exactly where I had him. 3 years, 30 million.
Yeah.
So let's say he gets that and it's not from the Giants. What kind of comp pick are you looking for that? Of getting back in return for that?
It's like
A fourth?
somewhere between a fourth and a fifth.
Right. So you're talking about getting maybe a
Type
comp. A
fourth.
comp fourth is basically a fifth. A comp fifth is basically a sixth.
Mhm.
So you're getting maybe like a fifth or a sixth round pick in 2025,
If you don't cancel it out.
which is hard not to do for that value.
Yep.
Um, so you're basically getting nothing for him essentially if you let him hit the market. So again, the team calls you and says, we'll give you a fourth. We want McKinney and a maybe they want to pick with him, you know. Um,
Mhm.
give us McKinney and a future seventh
Yeah,
or
it'd have to
something
be
like that.
future.
Yeah. No, seriously. What if like they call for that? Or they just say we'll give you a straight up fifth. Would you make the deal?
Um, I mean, I think it comes down to how committed you are to bringing him back. And I understand, like, what we talked about. Like, he's gonna hit open market. Like, he's gonna see what's out there. But if you're committed to trying to get something done with him, and I think there's a chance you could get him back anyway. Especially at I don't think that price is unreasonable, but you have to compete with teams that don't have income tax in their state, and he's from the warmer parts of the country. I don't think he's been like um, a guy who's really benefited from endorsements of being in New York, like a guy like Saquon Barkley. So I don't think that's as strong of an argument for a guy like him. So yeah, I do it, but I think if you're planning to bring him back, you don't trade him just to trade him because you're
That's
scared
it.
that you might lose him.
I think that's exactly the process. Like, even if I don't trade him, I'm sitting down with him and his agent, and I'm starting the process of working out a deal. Um, I really am. And personally, I think I mentioned this to people on this pod and on Spaces, and I told you for certainly that I would have been doing this for weeks. I would have
Yeah,
been sitting down with Xavier McKinney and David Mulugeta and saying, "I'd like to get you signed to a multi-year deal now," and lay out the framework of it and see how realistic it is. How willing are the two of them to sign a deal like that, so he doesn't hit the open market. Um, and if it appeared that they were way off in number than what you think you're willing to offer, or they're just not interested, I think you kind of have the information you need. And for all we know, Joe Shane did that. We don't know if he did or didn't do that. But if the answer is it doesn't, you don't come away feeling confident that he's going to resign with you, I think you just move him. I,
yeah,
you just move him at that point. But if you feel very confident that he's likely to want to come back, if he expresses a strong desire to stay here, you lay out the framework of a deal and they seem interested and you're in the ballpark and it seems very likely that you'll work something out, I think then you can risk it and say we're not going to trade him for a fifth or something like that. Let's just see what happens.
yep,
But this, like you said, it's all about the commitment to keep him.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Um, but yeah, man, now we're looking at what's coming forward with us and how this team's going to do and the rest of the season. I'll be honest, man, with the uncertainty of Daniel Jones, and I know we're hearing week 9, week 10, and maybe those reports end up being true, but we also have heard some concerning reports about what the injury is. So I don't know. I'm keeping the same approach I had before, where he's out for the rest of the season until he's cleared, and I'm just gonna wait till he's cleared. So with that in mind, with the mind that Tyrod's spending the night in the hospital with a rib injury, and we're down to Tommy DeVito or Matt Barkley or whoever we're gonna have, it there's a real chance we don't win a game for the rest of this season. I feel like that's what we're at this point.
It's hard to see us winning any more games with the offense the way it's playing anyway. But you put in Tommy DeVito or whoever else, it's just like, where are the points? Even those 11 points per game, where are they coming from? It's you're going to rely more and more heavily on Saquon Barkley, and you're going to break them. It's just you can see the writing on the wall here where this is going. Like that's another one. Like I don't understand. Like we're committed not to trade you. Like why would you even say that?
That's
Why would you go
crazy.
out of your like even if you mean it, even if you think it, why would you publicly state that? Just it's
Handcuff
just
yourself.
you really have because now you can't trade them. Even if somebody calls you now and says, "Look, you're 2-6, your team's falling apart. You don't have a quarterback."
Yeah,
Um,
here's a
I,
first for
I,
Saquon Barkley.
what? Do you, well,
It's not gonna
then trade him.
happen. Yeah,
But
but then what then the owner's gonna be like, "No, that's not the Giants way. We told them we're not gonna trade him."
they've really made some head scratching public maneuvers. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
they have.
It's free to it's like as one of my friends on Twitter Jay said like it doesn't cost anything to shut the fuck up,
Yeah,
and to say nothing. It was really bizarre. But you're right. It's hard to see us winning another game. I'm sure they'll find a way to. I'm not saying they can't, but the defense is playing great. You never know. But man, the offense is just dead, and
yeah,
it's just hard to see what will happen. So I really think they need to be dangling every one of the guys we talked about and see what happens. Like I really believe they should be in that mood. And people are going to say like, you can't tank. Well, what do you call what's happening now? You're scoring 11 points a game. You're not trying to tank, but you're
and
not doing anything.
and it's getting worse. Like,
Yeah.
I I know that, like, right now we're banking on the uncertainty of Andrew Thomas's hammy and the uncertainty of Daniel Jones' neck to save the season from being a total embarrassment. That's where we're at this point.
We might as well talk about that for a second. Conflicting reports all weekend about Daniel Jones's neck. Sequence of events. Friday, Dable has his press conference and sounds less than certain that Jones is coming back. And when he's asked a follow-up question about, sounds like you're less certain about his timeline and his return, his response to that was, "Yep." That was his
Yeah.
answer. Brian Dable is maybe a lot of things. He's not a liar. He's very much like an open book test.
Mhm.
He shows you what he's feeling. His reaction there told you that they were concerned at minimum about
Mhm.
the prospects of him returning. The very next day, the spin cycle starts with a lot of the typical players in Giants media. I won't even name them because at this point, everybody knows who they are. He'll be back in a week. He'll be back in 2 weeks. Dallas, this, like Las Vegas, they're eyeing Las Vegas. Don't like, shh, don't tell anyone. Like Las Vegas and Dallas
Yeah.
and like we don't. You heard it here first, although you didn't really hear it. Like all these reports leaking and all this stuff. And I'm thinking Brian Dable the other just yesterday is making it sound like we have no idea when he's coming back. Yet today you have a report that he's ready to go in a week, but he hasn't been cleared for contact.
Yeah.
But he's going to be ready in a week.
Every report I'm hearing is like it's like, "Oh, yeah, Giants, they think it's gonna be soon," but so, like, they're thinking week 9 or week 10, but then, like, it always seems when you read the article, it's always kinda followed up, but they don't really know for sure
And
about
he still
when.
hasn't been cleared for contact.
Yeah.
And then today we get a report, a national report from Tom Pelissaro, which has the most detail I've seen about his injury. Basically, in summary, saying he had what sounds like a disc injury to the neck in 2021, and that he has another disc injury now. I don't know if it's true, but this is what they're sort of saying in the report from sources they mention, not sources inside the organization, from sources, um, and that he's not cleared for contact. That he had significant. This is the word for word significant left-sided weakness as a result of the injury, and that while most of that weakness has resolved, has improved, it's not all gone yet, and he's not yet cleared for contact. So, without getting into the medical interpretation of that, let's just say it's bad. It implies a fairly significant injury to the neck, to the disc, or the spinal vertebra. Um, it suggests he has something called spinal stenosis, which is a fairly significant condition. And I don't know how you can look at that story that's coming out 2 days after Brian Dable sounded very aloof about his timeline and somewhat concerned about it, and not come away with, like, the thought process, like, they really don't know if this kid is gonna get cleared. They don't know what his status is. At best, it's up in the air. It sure sounds like this may be one of those, like, he'll be back, he'll be back, he'll be back. Oh, wait a minute, his season's over. That's what it's feeling like.
Mhm. And it's like, even if this gets delayed at all, like, it's not like versus Dallas. Let's say even Tyrod, if we have like 3 weeks without these guys, I mean, we have Raiders next week. That's like one of our most winnable games. If we don't have those guys, that's a loss. Jimmy Garoppolo's back tomorrow night. Like, they have Garoppolo unless he gets hurt. Um, Cowboys is probably gonna be a loss either way. Washington, that's another game like we could win. Um, Patriots after that, that's another game we could win. Like, we have a outside of the Cowboys, we have a stretch of like some of our most winnable games, and then Packers and Saints after that if we have a quarterback. But after that, if we don't get our quarterback that, even if they come back for the last 3 games of the season, we have Eagles, Rams, Eagles. Like,
I mean, at best, you're looking at, like, right now, the most optimistic view is you're looking at, like, a 4 to 5 win season.
yeah.
That's probably, like, that realistically is looking at, like, the most optimistic view of things right now. Hard to imagine they squeeze out more than 2 to 3 wins at this point to the end of the season. And like you said, there's a reasonable chance that they just run the table with losses at this point. So it's tough, man. Um, the Giants are obviously nobody wanted this. Nobody wanted the season to unfold this way. We all had high hopes that they were going to build something. Didn't work out for a lot of reasons. Injury being a big part of it, but just didn't work out. That doesn't mean the season's lost. There are young players balling out in defense. There are young players on offense that look like they have a lot of potential. They need a chance to develop, but the team needs to actually prepare itself for the future. And what's in their best interest at this point is, in my opinion, just closing this out, trading some expiring vet deals, making some hard decisions, acquiring as many draft picks as they possibly can, positioning themselves well for a really strong draft class to rebuild, getting their own quarterback. Start there, keep building, and it may not be a very long process to get back to real competitive football, but I don't think they're going to get there on this path.
Yeah. And it can't be a long process, man. We're wasting the young prime years of some really good players on this roster, and we need to we were competitive last year. We aren't this year. We got to get back to that. And I think getting a young quarterback in here that is handpicked by this team, that's going to come in with a rookie deal where you can just build around him. And I think the biggest thing people kind of ignore at this is it really sets a clear plan for the team. Once you have that rookie quarterback in, there's so many ways you can go about it, but the plan is clear. You could, you're rebuilding, but you have that money. You want to spend $30 million on a wide receiver, so your young quarterback as wide receiver. You can do that. Like there's there's not many wrong ways to try to build around a young quarterback outside of not building around the young quarterback. Like
I
it just kind
agree.
of sets the it sets a table to kind of really start going from there.
When Joe Shane decided to double down on this team last year, specifically Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, and build around them, um, I was not a proponent of it. Many of us were not. And even those of us who were fine with it felt like it should have been more of a short-term commitment, as short as possible, at least
Yeah.
with the quarterback. But the one thing everybody agreed on was he didn't handcuff himself for years. He
No.
gave out short-term deals for the most part, even with the quarterback. He gave himself an out with most of these deals that if things didn't work out, he could recognize it and pivot and then rebuild. I'm sure he didn't expect it to happen within 10 weeks of football, but it has.
Yeah.
And he needs to pivot. He has 2 days left before the trade deadline. He needs to start pivoting fast. He needs to pivot very hard right now and turn this thing around in terms of his approach. If Joe Shane does not pivot, if he does not pivot, if he does not acquire draft capital, if he just lets the season die on a vine with vets just playing out and then eventually going wherever, I will have concerns about his approach to this. You know, I already have reservations about some of his contract management, but
Mhm.
I think pivoting to set us up for the future is the most important job he's facing right now, and he needs to be able to do that. All the other stuff, all the other noise be damned. He needs to do that now.
I think one thing, and fuck the fans. I get like, who cares? They don't owe us anything. But as a fan, I think it would go a long way to send a message to us that if he moves on and makes a trade at this trade deadline, that he's taking this seriously and is look just one move will send a clear message that he's taking this seriously and is planning to fix this thing. But sitting on his hands sends the opposite message.
I think a lot of people made the point like Giants are very afraid of sending the message to their fan base that they're tanking, you know, or that they've given up because they don't want to like drive them away from the ball from the stadium. Nothing keeps fans from coming to your park like losing. You're losing and playing a bad brand of football. They're not coming anyway. Trust me. Nobody wants to show up and watch this crap. They don't want to watch their team lose. They don't want to see them not be able to score. They don't want to feel like they have to boo people because they're so offended by what they're watching. They don't. So you're already losing those people. If you want to get them back, you'll give them something worth watching. And you're not going to be able to do it this year. What you give them is hope that there'll be something better next year. And I think you
Yep.
need to pivot. You'll have the respect of those fans. You'll have their faith. Nobody's going to hold it against you to do that. But if you keep doubling down on this, you will lose the faith of those fans.
You lose
So
your
Joe
job.
Shane, it's on you.
It's I mean, we've talked about it. It's this Daniel Jones contract isn't going to lose Joe Shane's job. It's only going to lose his job if he continues to double and triple down on this contract. He can get off of this contract and it will be a stain on his resume, but he can move forward and he can leave that in the past. But
He'll be on a stain on his resume, but Jalen Rager was a stain on Howie Roseman's resume. You
Carson
know,
Wentz,
Carson Wentz was a stain on his resume, but then he
like,
turned that into, AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts and a
yep,
Super Bowl appearance. And he pivoted, right? And he kept building through the draft and making shrewd moves. That is where you need to be. And by the way, the backbone of Howie Roseman's like mystical power was accumulating draft assets. That's what he
yep,
did. He acquired draft picks. He did what he could to acquire draft picks, and he just hit home runs on all of them. Really, the way he managed them, whether it was trading them, manipulating them, who he drafted. But the point is, unless he accumulated those draft picks, he had nothing. He was going to be fired at some point, and he turned it around. That's how you turn it around. It turns around quickly if you get those draft picks and you start hitting home runs with them. That's what
Yep.
Joe Shane's going to do.
100%, man.
All right, man. You have anything else for this reaction pod?
Nope. I'm proud of the defense. It sucked watching us lose like that, but ultimately we are probably not going to be winning a lot of games for the rest of the year. So I'm probably not going to be too mad about losing that game when we're talking this off season. So is what it is, I guess.
All right. So that is our reaction pod for the week 8 loss to the Jets 13-10. The Giants fall to 2-6. With our trade deadline approaching next week, the Giants are in Las Vegas to play the Raiders. For those who haven't seen it, it's a gorgeous stadium out there in Las Vegas. So if you're out visiting, don't not go to the game just because you're upset at the Giants. It's a beautiful place to visit. Check it out. Enjoy yourselves. The trade deadline's on Tuesday. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about. For those who have not tuned in yet, Monty and I recorded our episode on safeties a few days ago, and we're going to be doing cornerbacks later this week, and then pretty soon, with the next week and a half, we get into work on the big one on quarterback. So tune in. You can follow us. I'm Sal at Queens_guy. You can find Monty at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO. That's on Twitter/X. Or you can find us at He's a Giant Pod. Monty, any closing thoughts?
No, man, let's get some trades done. Let's
Let's
go get him, Joe Shane.
let's win some fucking trades. All right.
Yeah.
All right. All right. With that, we'll say goodnight, and we'll see you guys later this week.
All right. See you later this week.